Hi, I'm Cherron Inko-Tariah. I'm the founder of the Power of Staff Networks, and I'm also the author of The Incredible Power of Staff Networks. And today I'm going to be talking to you about change. The author and public speaker Deepak Chopra said this: "All great changes are preceded by chaos." As a career coach, I often encounter people who tell me that they are afraid of change. But when I dig deeper, what I find is that people are actually afraid of the impact of that change, because we go through changes all the time and we come through on the other side. So what I do is ask them two questions. The first question is this: what would you do if you weren't afraid? And the second question is, if time, talent, money, opportunity and energy were limitless, what would you do? I asked myself these questions about 5 or 6 years ago when I was faced with redundancy in the civil service. I had to ask myself, Cherron, what would you do if you weren't afraid? And I realised that of all the things I wanted to do, staying in my current job wasn't one of them. And so I made a decision. I made a decision to leave and carve out a new career for myself. So once I made the decision that I was actually going to leave the civil service, I thought, what am I going to do before I go? And there were 3 things I wanted to do. As I was the chair of a staff network, I wanted to make sure that all the members who wanted to stay were helped and supported, and I encouraged them in the best way that I could. The second thing I wanted to do was to prepare myself for the future, and therefore I took full advantage of all the courses and all the workshops, seminars, everything that was on offer to equip me for my future. And the third thing I wanted to do was to identify an organisation that would help me work with young people. And I did that. So I'd left the civil service, I had armed myself with various tools through the courses. What was I going to do now? I started to volunteer with the charity and worked with young people in schools, and this was great. But I still had this burning desire to work with staff networks. But my challenge was, where do I start with that? So I spoke to some friends and they just said, well, why don't you pull it together and write a book? Get out there and start speaking to people. And that's what I did. I just started to speak to people and find out about their experiences, what they would find helpful in a book, and also how to convey my experience that would prove helpful in some sort of handbook for people running staff networks. My biggest challenge was my mindset. So even though I'd made this decision and I felt good about the decision, I was still afraid. I was afraid of failing. I was afraid of having to return back to the civil service. I was being dictated by fear. And I really wanted to not do that. I really wanted to put the fear to one side. But I had all these things going around in my mind. You're not supposed to do this and you're not supposed to do that. Based on what I've heard, about people who look like me. And there's no evidence to support this. There is no evidence whatsoever. And I decided that I had to put all of that to one side and choose the next step. And the next step for me was to believe that I could write a book and it will help people. I gave myself permission to dream big. And then I took steps to achieve those dreams. Was it scary? Yes, it was. But through a strong supportive circle of friends, through some prayer and courage, I stepped into a whole new world. A world where I am proud of who I am, I'm proud of what I look like, I'm proud of what my skills are, my strengths and values are. A world where I feel I can make a real valued contribution. And I realise that I'm here for a purpose and on purpose. And for me, my purpose is to bring equity to all employees through staff networks. And that's what I intend to do. So now I'm in my second career. I'm an author, I'm a consultant, and I'm a coach, doing something I really enjoy. And that's a really powerful place to be. And so I'm happy that I've gone through the process and I've come out the other side. So let me just share 3 things that I've learnt along this journey. The first one is this: whenever we face uncertainty or adversity, Let's focus on what we can change and control. If you can't change it or control it, don't spend your energy on it. It's just not worth it. The second thing I've realised is this, that emotions aren't facts. So never make a decision, a permanent decision based on temporary feelings. Never do that. And finally, and I think this is the most important one for me, is that nothing is ever wasted. None of the skills you've gleaned, all your experience, or everything that you've got in your bag of tools will never be wasted. You may need to just think about reframing how you use those skills, the experience, and so on. So here are 3 questions to ask yourself. Number 1, what would you do if you weren't afraid? The second question is, what challenges may you encounter as you step out to achieve those things? And the final question is, how are you going to overcome those challenges? The final thing I want to say to you is this. When I gave myself permission to step into this new world, 3 things happened. Firstly, I began to see my potential. Secondly, I discovered my purpose. And finally, I tapped in to my personal power.